Welcome to TutorLift's parenting series, featuring insights from leading experts in parenting and education. My name is Omar Ndani, and I'm the founder of TutorLift. Today, I'm really excited to host Alyson Schafer, a celebrated family counselor, international best-selling author, and public speaker. Alyson has presented at global conferences, including TEDxKids and events for the World Trade Organization. She's also a familiar face on TV, as the creator of the parenting show on Rogers and the resident expert on the Marilyn Denis show and the Global Morning Show. Her books, including Breaking the Good Mom Myth and Honey, I Wrecked the Kids, offer practical advice on cooperative and democratic parenting. Join us as we explore Alyson's insights into creating harmonious family environments and empowering children to thrive.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate this way. And I always enjoy having a conversation about parenting because I am a parent and we all need support, and always wanting to try to find a way to help parents get more information so that they can have a better parenting journey without being intimidating by there's so much to know, and well, now there's more tips and techniques I'm supposed to be doing that I'm flubbing on. So I don't want to come off that way. I prefer staying up in those higher notes. And so that's where I think that what is cooperative parenting, why is it so important now, and why is it so important for teens, really comes back to having an appreciation that there is a cultural shift happening if you pull back the lens far enough. And certainly in European, North American, colonialist countries, we've come from a real hierarchical or organized society. And we see that being chipped away at for all of its wrongs on every level societally. And what we're seeing is this trend, this healthy trend towards social equality, democracy, and that we need to get along with our fellow person through cooperation, not obedience. And I know that just sounds so apparent when you just say it, but when you get into like how families operate and the day-to-day interactions, that becomes a lot harder to grapple with philosophically applied to life than parents really realize. Yes, I want to be respectful. Yes, I want my kids to get along, but they need to put their plate in the dishwasher, darn it. And so the application of it becomes a lot harder. And when we have little kids, you can do a lot of being the more educative type dominant force in the family, because we're like, you need to brush your teeth and you need to have a vegetable and you need to sleep so many hours. And it comes along with not too much pushback, depending on the temperament of your kids. You can get away with that for a while. But the important part here, Omar, is that when you hit adolescence, it's very unlikely that if you haven't gotten up to speed on this, it's going to start biting you in the bum. Teenagers are very sensitive to distributions of power. And if they in any way, shape, or form think that you are demeaning them, controlling them, underestimating them, talking down to them, they are going to pick up on that and they are going to give you pushback, and you're going to get into a power struggle. And so we have this necessary tension of how do we win cooperation versus forcing obedience. And most parents really don't have a very full toolbox on how to do that. And in fact, they're often completely have blinders on about things that they don't even notice are power issues. They just think that it's a parenting tradition. A good parent would force their kid to hand over their phone and force them to go to bed because they need this much sleep. And I know better than them. And I know that's healthy. And I'm the ruler of the household. And why isn't that working? And I just want to reassure parents, I also think kids should have limits to their tech. I also think they should get a good night's sleep. It's not that I don't agree with those overall arching goals and values, but the method in which we achieve them and get them to happen successfully, going through the cooperative route, winning the child over versus forcing compliance on the child, are really night and day. And we just don't have a cultural tradition of it in the Western world. We do in more collectivist societies, but it's not really what would have been modeled for many parents that I encounter in my practice and my parent study groups. That's what I spend a lot of time trying to help parents see a version of it. So, for example, trying to turn this into from the philosophical 1,000-foot view to what does that look like on the ground? One example might be that kids will not tolerate having a schedule or rules imposed upon them. That feels very top heavy in a power structure. Who are you to tell me how I should live my life, what time I should get up, what I should eat, what I should do and not do when? Instead, then, because you're going to get pushback on that, is instead to have a conversation and a discussion, an egalitarian open dialogue that allows you to bring some of your elder wisdom, sage wisdom from being on the planet longer, having more prefrontal cortex competencies than our developing teens, and really trying to stimulate them in a way that they participate in a conversation and make co-agreements rather than hard and fast rules that are imposed from above. And things that are based on shared outcomes. Just like I said, I think most parents want their kids to eat well and sleep right and do well. It's the method that we get there that's the problem. So I would start there with my teens. I might say, I love you very much, and I'm really curious to know what kind of a year you want to have. I want to help you reach your goals. They're your goals. What kind of a school year do you want to have? What's that going to look like to you? What kind of grades do you want to get? And you have to be okay if you have a child who says, I'm really okay with a B. A lot of parents want their kids to get A's in every subject all the time across the board. And they have a hard time understanding that a B actually means that you are achieving what this school board designation is for on par with the normal distribution of their learning as they should be. Everyone wants their parent ahead of the curve. They want them to have the leading edge. And sometimes when you've got kids who are going through psychological problems, maybe they're bouncing back and forth between split parent homes, maybe they're on an elite athletic team, maybe they've got a part-time job, they might actually be okay saying to be a friend and to do my job and to do everything else. I'm okay with a B in this subject matter. It's not my favorite subject. If I get a B in geography, I'm going to be okay with that. As a parent, we have to be able to say, okay, you do you. I can't motivate you more. I can say, I think you could get an A if you cared to, if you wanted to put the work in, but it sounds like you're being fine with a B. And then I might work backwards and say, what needs to happen for you to shape a year where that mark happens for you and then you might have to get really specific. Are you going to study between 5 and 6? You're going to study between 7 and 8. You're going to study before your job. You might have to get granular. But then once you've got agreements, then you can say, how can I help? How can I keep the guardrails on so that you reach your goals? And you might have to say, I'm sorry, we had an agreement. You said you wanted to get a B in geography. You said that you were going to accomplish that by studying from 7 till 8 o'clock at night. It's now 8 o'clock at night. Are you going to turn off the TV or am I going to turn it off for you? I just want to live out the goals of our plan so that things unfold the way you'd like them to. So I don't want parents to think that I'm espousing something that's a really permissive style of parenting. It's actually got a lot of teeth in it, but it's really about the way we go about helping our kids set goals, process information independently, but keeping that guardrail sidecar rule for ourselves as they figure out some of those independent skills on their own. I think for parents to realize that we're not really being helpful to our youth when we continue to propagate a cultural myth. I believe it is an unhelpful myth. It's really hurting the mental health of this group of people. They have one of the highest mental health. And it is because we perpetuate a story of scarcity. We perpetuate a story that says only the cream that rises to the top, that has the highest marks, that has the best resume, that's the best in everything, the best. And we say, if that doesn't happen for you, the alternative is you're a loser in life. And there's literally paralysis that happens from kids when they hear that. If you actually talk about the life experiences of parents, they'll tell you like, "Oh, I started at this university and then I dropped out and then I switched majors and then I didn't get my master's until I was in my 40s. And I started off selling cars and then I went back and decided that I wanted to or I got a degree as a lawyer and then I realized it was a soul-sucking job. And so I became a travel blogger." Listen to the stories of people's lives and how they got to where they got. You think it's a very direct line that you can't pivot. If you make one wrong mistake, if you pick the wrong course, the wrong university, that you're fated for failure. It just has such a failure scarcity mentality behind it. And so I don't think parents' fears are helping to put a buffer. I think we do better putting a buffer at saying, give it your best, check it out, see what happens. If you can't go there, go somewhere else. Start in one program, get your marks up, and then transfer to another program. I think we need to be calming our kids, not trying to use a cattle prod to spur their motivation, because we're just pushing them over the anxiety peak where they're really, even if they could get the A's, can they sustain it because they're actually crumbling and needing to drop out and move home because they're having a breakdown. So I think we have to be that calming force and look at that motivation that says, you'll find your way, whatever path that might be. And if not here, then there. And if not now, then later. And to really get them to understand that it's a journey and that we get better at being students, we get better at learning, and it's not for everybody. There's all kinds of people that go on to have rich, fulfilled lives that took much different paths. And of course, there's wonderful benefits from getting formal education, but it's not the only way to be a full human being. And if we sell it that way, those kids who are not tracking, we have a huge amount of the population that we're leaving behind psychologically that I think we're doing a tremendous disservice to. And the ones that are doing well are probably going to do anyways. I think just being more realistic with the message so that we bring the pressure off. They put enough pressure on themselves. It is interesting how one of the maybe benefits or silver linings of the pandemic is because we basically had a global mental health crisis. It really gave us permission to talk about it and come out more publicly about it. Every year, I think we've gotten better and better at it. So I think we are getting more comfortable about talking about mental health issues. The most important thing is that everybody feels that they have support. And that doesn't necessarily always come from your family. In fact, I would say, because I'm a family counselor, a lot of times when I look at crumbling mental health in my youth, the culprit is their parents. And I don't mean to be wagging the finger at the parents, but the pressure, the fact that they love their parents and they want to, be held in their regard in a different way than they are, or not feeling seen or understood, or they might come out of their closet and their parents really don't understand about sexual orientations and they're your parents. So they're a primary attachment figure. So their response to you is super important. So I think what's important is that everybody has somebody to talk to. And if it's not your parent, and I say this to parents too, if they don't want to talk to you about your problems, don't feel dismissed, because often they want to keep a sign of privacy about their maybe darker side or their not most glamorous side. But the question is, does everybody have someone to talk to? Is it Kids Helpline? And I'll say this because I do work with Kids Helpline. A lot of people hear the word kid and they think that if you go off to college, university, or you're in the upper grades, you think that you're too mature or too old to get those counseling services. There is no age limit, including parents calling for support, or an aunt or an uncle or a coach or somebody that you can talk to. If you can identify one person that you can talk to. So great, a trained counselor is great. Talking to your parents, great. But if you can't meet those criteria, there's other ways. Just be creative and solve that problem. And to remember that mental health is something that isn't like two buckets where you're mentally well or you're mentally ill. I think that's another confusion. I think it's better to think about mental health as being like body health. It's a continuum. So either you're like the potato chip eating couch potato, or you're the elite athlete Olympian. And there's everything in between. So I think the same. You could be somebody who's got real mental health issues and dissociations and schizophrenia and some of these types of problems. Or you could be at the other end where you're a meditating monk and have tremendous mental health. And all of us are somewhere on that continuum of our mental health, the same as our physical health. And all of us are challenged to say, where's my growing edge? What could I be doing more? And that might be being more social and staying connected. That might be more being out in nature. That might be more meditating. That might be more having hobbies or staying offline or being more authentic and not subjugating your true self in order to please people. It could be any of a million things. So I think just so long as all of us understand that it's everybody's business to look after their mental health, and a lot of us are operating with subclinical problems, but we all still have to attend to our mental health. It's not a dirty word. It's just a thing to do, exercising. One of your opening questions to me was about raising cooperative kids. And so, what a great segue when you realize that human beings are, by their very nature, social creatures, the way that ants live in a colony, cows live in a herd. We live in families, we live in communities, we live in schools, we're social. Everything about us is going to make that our primary driver. And when we're having troubles with relationships, we're going to really suffer. It is going to eclipse how we're doing in trigonometry. And those things are going to be our really big pain points. And learning to cooperate, learning how to get along is a skill that you learn in the family. And I think that one of the trends in parenting that I've seen is that a lot of kids today really don't get trained for cooperation. Parents are more likely to treat them individually rather than collectively. And so things like, these are small things but I'll just give you like a small example. Like kids learning to wait and not interrupt when people are speaking. So it's a small thing, but what they end up learning is whenever I want the floor, everybody else should stop talking so that I can now take over. Or picky eaters who demand, I don't want what we're having for dinner. Go make me something else. I want my chicken fingers and my French fries. And tired parents go and do that. And then you get a child who really becomes quite self-entitled, where they don't have to pay consideration for other people. So then you put them in a classroom situation and they all want to be the line leader. And they all want to put their hand up and have the teacher pick them first because that's all that's ever happened in their whole life. And you're really not training them for the reality that in life, you have to get along with other people in order to have healthy relationships. It's the give and take of social living. And if you fail at those relationships, you're going to really struggle. You're going to really struggle. So as parents, they feel bad having to teach these lessons early. I'm like, do not feel bad about this. You are giving your kid the best gift you can give them. You're teaching them to get along with fellow people. That will keep them whole and healthy for the whole rest of their lives. I would begin by saying that parents should appreciate that it's their job to set limits and boundaries, and it's their child's job to find those limits and boundaries by pressing upon them. And that's also why I'm saying in adolescence, the more that you have an open, preventative conversation about what those agreements are, the more you're going to have buy-in. Kids are much more likely to live within agreements that they had some voice and some say over establishing. But once you start getting some pushback, instead of saying it's the narrative that you tell yourself, if you say, this is my child being negative, being defiant, you're going to create a whole background narrative of bad characterological traits. Whereas I think it's easier to say, this is the job of being a youth, because they're now trying to differentiate themselves from me, and they're going to kick every one of your values. And it doesn't mean, again, taking the long-term to parenting, if they kick it around now, it doesn't mean that forever and a day that they're going to be that way. You've probably impressed it upon them by modeling. So I'll use the example of healthy eating. Let's say you're a nutritionist and you've got a teen and all they do is want to eat McDonald's and bags of Frito-Lay and Coca-Cola in their room, and they're hiding food. And you're like, don't you understand? Your brain can't grow on that good food. This is my profession. I know how bad it is for you. Yes, I agree. It's not optimal eating. I completely agree. But part of what's going to happen is that if we handle the situation appropriately and not double down into this power struggle and stay at war with our child about it, the more likely we're going to win favor, have influence rather than command and control. Will win influence. And yeah, maybe they'll have a couple of years of bad eating, but they're more likely than of their own volition to start saying, well, my mom was a nutritionist. She always ate well. So when they start to actually adopt some of these values and start eating more healthily when they're in their 20s, it isn't going to be because you made them and you subverted them and they were like they were the puppet and you were the puppeteer, or they were the peon that got dominated and had these values imposed upon them. It's because they kicked those values around and they said, I'm going to adopt this value, not because it was crammed down my throat, but because I, as an adult, young adult, actually think that this has merit. And so I'm going to choose to behave this way on my own terms. So I think we have to avoid the reflex, which is when our kids are being resistive, it's like a tug of war, like trying to pull a resistant donkey. The more you pull in one direction, the more you invite resistance in the opposite direction. So I find that if you come across as being oppositional or anti to your child, they see you as the enemy, and it just invites more conflict. So instead, we want to be an ally, and we want to be curious, and we want to be more coaching like and being loving and concerned. I'm really concerned. I know you really like your carby, salty foods. That's what the brain gets a big dopamine hit from. But I just want to make sure I've done my good parenting to let you know there's some other good things in the fridge. But come to me if you ever decide that you want to do things differently. Then we have to be sit comfortably with the fact that they're probably going to do life very differently for us for months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But in the long run, you've got a kid who still has an intact relationship with their parent who trusts and respects them. And then they'll get rid of the 10 extra pounds of stupid weight. we gotta take the long game. One is that parents really hear this word consequences, but they never do them, or they do them improperly. A logical consequence is the idea that every person on the planet, and especially teen, but every person on the planet is free to make autonomous decisions. And autonomy is very big for teens. So I want to make up my mind. I want to decide for me. And so we allow kids to make their own choices, but every choice also comes with an outcome. So you can choose not to take your clothes out of the washing machine, but the consequence is it's going to get moldy if you don't move it to the dryer. That's what happens. I'm an adult. I know what happens if I forget my clothes down in the washing machine for too many days in a row. Right? I know that if I don't pack my lunch and put it in the car, that I'm going to end up at work and I'm going to have to buy lunch. Or consequences is learning from our decisions. What I find with parents is that they don't want their kids to experience consequences. And I'm of completely the opposite mind. The only way you learn is by experiencing consequences. So what ends up happening is parents step in. They don't like things being bad and sloppy, and they don't like mistakes, and they don't like imperfection. So they threaten consequences. They talk about consequences. They nag so that you don't get a consequence. And I would say, just step back, make a good consequence and let it unfold and say less. The learning comes experientially. If you're giving your kid a ride to school and you say, my car is going to work at 8:30, I'll drop you off on my way if you're in the car by 8:30, then don't start screaming at 8:27 or get angry at 8:33. Just drive away at 8:30. You don't have to bring all this emotional stuff to it. Just do it. Just do what you said you were going to do. And like tomorrow, you'll figure it out tomorrow, or you won't. It doesn't matter to me. So I think parents get very invested in their kids' choices, and they really don't do consequences right. Or they'll say, if you're late for school, they can't think about the consequence being related to the action. So they end up going, what's the one thing they really care about? Oh, their phone. I'll take away their phone. Stop taking away their phone for everything. The only reason I would take away a kid's phone is if they were misusing it or bullying online or sexting inappropriately or that kind of. I wouldn't take away a phone because the kid didn't unload the dishwasher, or I wouldn't. They're not related. Consequences have to be related. So that's one thing I would say, get better at doing consequences for sure. And then the second thing is we can get really excited about how powerful consequences are because they really are effective when you learn to do them right. So then parents want to consequent everything. And then it also has its shortcomings. So I would prefer in the adolescent years to start thinking more about that family meeting, collaborative problem solving. So instead of saying you're a kid that has a character flaw and you're being a pill and you're never on time for school, what's wrong with you? I better consequent you and punish you. Instead, I might reframe that as saying, we have a problem in the family whereby people are not getting out the door on time. And we're fighting and people are late and it's, impeding on my ability to get to work on time and I don't want to nag. And how can we do that better? And I am telling you, Oliver, I've worked with so many families that when you actually frame it as a problem that needs a better solution, rather than a kid who's misbehaving that needs to be disciplined, it'll blow your mind how you go in a very different direction about solving problems. It's so much more effective. It's so much better for teens. You're training their brain to do that problem solving. You're using that executive functioning. They're getting a voice so they feel more powerful. You're doing it collaboratively, so you're getting more cooperation. It ticks all the boxes. So I would really recommend parents to Google family meeting for teens in any search engine to get just some kind of a framework, but do it in the way that feels natural for your family. It doesn't have to all be with little gavels and people. I think sometimes you don't have to get overly invested. Just stick with the concept of a problem that needs a better solution rather than a child who needs discipline. That right there is going to take you to a way better parenting place.